In this first video, we'll take a look at how to take an STL file and recreate it in SpaceClaim. Now, if I go to the Display tab, there's a small box where I click and I can display all the mesh. You'll notice this is a fairly clean mesh. There's not too many triangles, but it's fairly smooth, and this might be a better candidate for using the automated tools, the curve generating tools in SpaceClaim to recreate this. As a rule of thumb, the more simplified, the less noisy your model is, the better the candidate it is for using the curve fitting tools. Now I've just selected two axes down the middle, and I'll insert a reference plane. I always like to work with reference planes. That helps me establish a frame of reference for which I'll put curves on. Let's go into a sketch mode. When I'm in a sketch mode, I have the option over here on the left hand side, or by the selection options, to fit curves, and you'll see some green and blue edges or curves that start to appear. SpaceClaim's trying to form lines and curves. The auto merge option will turn those into splines or attempt to merge some of them together. Now that's what I'll use because I want to generate a nice long curve along the bottom. You notice the tolerance button, or the slider here. If you drag this up or down accordingly, you'll get a series of curves that will fit the STL a little bit closer or more loosely. Let me demonstrate that. It's set to 10 right now, which is right in the middle. If I drag this to closer to 1, it's trying to fit that mesh much closer. 20, it's obviously a much looser fit. So I'm just going to leave that at 10 for now. Zoom out and do a box select around the curve in the bottom. And do a copy and paste. So that will generate a curve that I'll use in a moment to put some reference planes on. Now I'll hide that curve, or hide the mesh for a moment, and go into a 3D mode. And this is a great trick. Once you click the reference plane, SpaceClaim's prompting you to put a reference plane. If I click the end point, or over the end point of that spline, it will attempt to put one right there, and it's actually normal to the very end of that spline. Now let's make a series of planes. Going into the Move tool, I select Sweep and create patterns. My sweep is going to be along this curve. I drag this down not too far. I'm not trying to recreate the whole thing. Maybe somewhere close to the middle. And we'll say 8 reference planes. You hit 8 and enter, and 8 planes are equally spaced out. Okay, so that's good. I'm going to leave it at that and start to recreate this. The trick is the more cross sections you have, obviously the more work it'll take, but the more accurate your model will be. I'll click on one cross section and go into sketch mode. Now what you may want to do for now is take this auto merge option off. On some of these it may cause a problem. They may look okay right now, but doing a box select will select all those temporary curves that SpaceClaim thinks it can generate. Now those are just temporary curves. That's just a visualization. What you need to do is select those and do a simple copy and paste, and you have a bunch of curves actually generated in your tree. Next button I want to select is Select New Sketch Plane. I click that and go on to the second sketch plane. Now here's a perfect example where you want to turn off that auto merge option. It's trying to turn that into a series of splines, but it's really better suited to be a line at the bottom. Now we'll take care of this in a moment, the fact that this is all lines and arcs, and I really need it to be a series of lines and probably splines. So we'll do that in just a moment, but this is really just a plug and chug operation. Copy paste, select new plane, and you select the plane. So it's really 4 button clicks and then a box select. Now I may end up adding a couple more reference planes in here towards the end, because in the next video I'll show you how to cap this off and create the very end of this, which can be a little bit tricky. Alright, so we'll do one more. Okay, that looks about good. We'll go back into a 3D mode. I'll actually, let's go back into a cross section, and instead of selecting a new plane, I'll just move this one a little bit further forward. And zoom in and do the same thing. Do a copy and paste and move it a little bit closer to the end. Because I'm getting closer to the end, this is where I may want a few more cross sections. That's exactly why I'm doing that. Okay, now I'll exit out of 3D mode. My screen looks a little bit cluttered. I've got a lot of planes, a lot of surfaces. We'll start hiding some things and try to make sense of this. So I've hidden the mesh. We'll go ahead and hide the plane and the pattern of planes that I also made. Some of those curves didn't actually convert into surfaces. That's okay. I'm not entirely sure why, so not a problem. You just need to use the fill tool after selecting the curves. And it's a closed loop of curves, and it'll turn those into surface bodies right away. Now the problem with trying to join all these together with the pull tool, watch what happens. This may or may not be what you want, but it's very noisy data. That's because all those cross sections were made up of small line segments. If I exit out of this and click in white space, look what happens when I hover over an edge. It's broken up into small segments. So this is a great idea, a great place to start using the curve simplifying tools in SpaceClaim. And let's just delete that long curve running down the middle. And for that matter, all the curves in the model, I can go ahead and delete them. What I'm going to do next is attempt to get all the curves back, simplify them, and generate brand new surfaces. Now in order to do that, I need to get curves on the screen. I want to take off my selection filter. It's this white arrow down here. I want to take off Smart and deselect Faces and Points, because it's just edges that I want to select at this point. Good, I have all the edges selected, 191 of them. That's quite a few. If I do a copy and paste, those are all generated as curves at the bottom. So that means these surfaces in the tree that I just worked so hard to create, I can go ahead and delete those without problem, because all the data is still right there. It's sort of stored in the form of those curves, if you will. Now the bottom of the curves, I want to keep those as lines. So what I want to do is hide them for a moment, because everything else is what I want to work on. Notice how I'm putting my view in a perspective where it's very easy for me to select the bulk of those horizontal lines. In fact, what you could do is select a Y and a Z axis and say Plan View. Now that's given me, it's not quite where I want, so that's okay. It's pretty darn close. I'll go ahead and select a bunch of those, right click and say Hide. And there's really only one that I missed. I'll right click on that and say hide. Now let's make sure I don't have any more curved or straight segments in here. It looks good to me. And you can see some of these segments are not all that smooth, so that's what we're going to do here. They're just made up of small arcs and lines. And this is really the fun part of fast simplification. Do a box select, get all those curves, and under the Repair tab there's a button called Fit Curves. Now what I'm looking for is, there's a few options here. I want to deselect lines, and I just want splines selected. The trick now is to move this slider bar, which represents the maximum distance between points. Move this slider bar so up or down so that you have only endpoints. Notice if I move to the left, the points are closer, and I don't want those. I want to move just far enough to the right so I really don't have any more left. And you'll find out it's somewhere around 20 thousandths or so, 20 thousandths of an inch, where SpaceClaim is able to simplify all the curves and not have any points in the middle. So there's the nice preview you're looking at. A green checkbox will solidify it. Let's bring back all the curves, which is really just everything I'm showing plus the horizontal segments. The fast way to do that is to click on that checkbox to hide everything, click it again, and it brings everything back. Okay, so last step to do, or second to last step, would be to grab all the curves, fill them in. I'm left with surface bodies. These are going to be clean surface bodies at this point. That means the curves I can delete. I don't need them anymore. They serve their purpose. Now I use that pull tool, and watch what happens. When you hold down the Control key and start selecting the surfaces, you're left with a profile, or I'm sorry, a preview of a very smoothed out board. And there's your solid. So we'll pick it up in the next video and show you how to do the very end of this. Thanks for watching.